the end of Sif Aleph, the Rebbe goes into the Oitza. After the Rebbe explained the whole beginning that you need the Oitza to help the Yidden, the Chayolim, in the Avodah, they need the Oitza. So he says, to explain better that what's so special about the Oitza, the Behaltene Oitza, the hidden Oitza, is Mevayit Chila HaYoike Shel HaGolui, the Amplekta. So he explains first what we know about. So Be'etzem the Rebbe is answering a question. What is the question? If you look at the Maamar Azal, the Maamar Azal is the other way around. First it says L'mayla Elei Ketz, and then it says Lamata Din Tachlis. But the Fidik Rebbe in the Maamar starts the whole Arichas Lamata Din Tachlis, and then he finishes off and he says, shame that Ein Sof is Lamata Mata, it is also L'mayla Mayla. So why did the Fidik Rebbe change the order? And the answer is because it's easier to understand first the amplekta, the inyan which we can understand. The mata is something that we can appreciate. Ein Sof is mispashet la mata, you see. The ata machayas kula, that you can see. The fact that the Eibishter is l'mayla be'ilu achi'ilu be'helem achaelem, this we don't see. Because when a helem you don't see, you just don't see anything, that's the helem. So, since we can understand the mata first, so he explains the mata first. And then, once we appreciate that this is also Ein Sof, is Ein Sof, that he comes all the way down and creates all the Nivroim, is then we can understand and appreciate also the Mayla. It happens to be that this question is asked not just here, it's asked in many Maamarim. The Rebbe asked this question, and each time he gives a slightly different biur, but this is like the most simple one. If you want for an example, you find the same thing in Tanya. In Tanya, if you look in Shayichad Ve'emunah, in Perek Daled, he also talks about the same two kavim, Hagodol v'Hagibor. Which one does he say first? Perek Daled, if you remember Shayichad Ve'emunah, he's out to explain the inyan of the Koyach HaGvul, the Koyach HaHester, the inyan of the Mog and the Shem Elikim. So he says, he wants to explain the Hester. He says, in order to understand the inyan of the Hester, the Koyach HaHester, is HaGodol v'Hagibor. We have two praises for the Eibishter, Godol and Gibor. And he goes to Arichas, half a page explaining what HaGodol is. The inyan of the Eibishter is Chesed and Gedula, and he's Mahava Yeshmiyayin. And then the end of the page he says, shame that he's Mahava Yeshmiyayin, and this you can't understand that. The same thing you can't understand how he's Mailim himself and he's Master himself. So you see also that he first goes on the HaGodol and then HaGibor. This is the Seder. You do what is most easily understood. So this is the most simple, straightforward answer. First you do what you can understand, and then you go to L'mayla Mayla. And then he says, das was heißt Pshutei schon beniste de Teira, she'oiren sof is sich oila, zieht sich ve'oila L'mayla Mayla, ad ein Ketz, k'meikeinu nimshach v'yered l'mata ad ein Tachlis. This line is a very interesting line, and is be'emerson the yisoid to understand the whole Maamar. The Rebbe says here one line. He says, till now we've explained what's the Rebbe looking at in this Perek, which is going to start now, Perek Tezayin. So throughout the whole Perek, throughout the whole Prokim till now, what does L'mayla Lamata mean? Oiren Sof is Oila L'mayla Mayla, and it's Nimshach Lamata Mata. Okay, so first he explains Lamata Mata, how you see how it's Mahava Machaya, every single Divrei, even to Lamata Mata, Adbitse Kinim, even somebody like Para gets Chayas, and then he says, L'mayla Mayla, he hides himself. L'mayla Mayla, Tzimtzum Rishon, Oira Kolabat Tzvusay, all different forms of Halamas Vestated. So L'mayla Lamata is translated as what? Aliyah and Hamshacha. Now in Perek Tezayin, the Fidik Rebbe does a new step. Let's just learn the beginning of Sif Beis. The Mamshach Perek B'Shana Zu. B'nei Beis Inyanim Ela Dein Sof L'mayla Mayla Teketz Lamata Mata in Tachlis. Heim Beis Madreges B'Ein Sof Baruch Hu V'Yesh Hefresh Gadol B'Neihem. All of a sudden we've changed the pirush of Mayla Mata. Mayla Mata doesn't mean Aliyah and Hamshacha. Mayla Mata is two levels in Oiren Sof Lifnei Atzitz. Two Madreges in Oiren Sof. This is a new pirush. Which one of these two pirushim, again, Oir and Sof Lama, how would you translate it without the Maamar? How would you think, what's the translation of the words? Oir and Sof is Lamayla dedicates Lamata de Tachlis. What would you think that means?
It's everywhere.
He's everywhere. That's that's one of the explanations, and that's what it says in one of the kashas on that pirush is why it should say simply Nesa Saponamine, he's everywhere. But he doesn't say he's everywhere, he says he's Lamayla Lamata. Something that's everywhere, you don't have to say it's Lamayla Lamata. So for example, a Svara is Lamayla Lamata. The Svara is. It's not anywhere. And the stuff is everywhere, so just say he's everywhere. What do you mean he's Lamayla and Lamata? What's the kasha usually on this word Lamayla Lamata that's brought down in Chassidus? Maila and Mata are Teirim of Gvul. Maila means the ceiling, Mata means the floor. How can you say in Oir and Sof there's Maila Mata? This is the question. So how would you explain Maila Mata? The most simple way is, what explained till now, the Oir and Sof is Oila Lamaila and is Nimshach Lamata. All of a sudden now we've changed from this pirush that Lamaila Lamata is two madreges in Oir and Sof. Is that Pshutei Shol, can't say Shol Mikra, but Pshutei Shol Maamar Azal. Does that make sense? To say that Maila Mata is two levels in Oir and Sof. It's not Pshutei Shol Maamar Azal. So this is the Yesod, what he said before, in the end of Sif Beis, Sif Aleph. That Oir and Sof Lamaila Lamata until now was Pshutei Shol Benista de Torah. What does it mean Pshutei Shol Nista de Torah? How does Pshutei Shol Nista de Torah differ from Pshutei Shol Mikra, Pshutei Shol Nigla de Torah? What's the difference between Pshutei of Nista and Pshutei of Nigla? But Pshutei Shol Mikra, we know from all this Rebbe Sichas on Rashi, Pshutei Shol Mikra means it has to make sense on a very basic level. Even a Ben Chomesh Mikra has to be able to appreciate it and understand it. It has to make total sense. No Ramazim, no Drushim, no nice Hergeshim. It has to be Pshat. That's Pshutei Shol. Can you do the same thing in Nista de Torah? Just understand things on a very basic level. You cannot. Because this is an example. Maila Amata. Can you say in Alakus Teirim of Gvul? Can you say on Oir and Sof that he has Maila and he has Mata? These Teirim are not Teirim which are Shaykhas Alakus. So we're going to have to take it out, not literally. It can't mean literally Maila Mata. It has to mean some Teichen. What is the Teichen of Maila Mata? The Teichen of Maila Mata means it has an Aliyah and it has Amshocha, like he explained till now. Just by the way, just to give an example how what you must have this Yesod, there's something called Pshutei Shel Nista de Torah. What's the most famous machlokes of Mekubalim and Gdolei Yisrael, which is all based on Pshutei or not Kipshutei? The Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum Kipshutei. If you read the Eitz Chaim and it says Tzimtzum Oira HaGadol Al Atzad, or Tzimtzum Es Atzmoi, Kipshutei, he moved himself aside. And there was nothing wrong in learning Pshat like that. It's not the correct pshat, we know that from the Alter Rebbe. But there's nothing wrong in understanding that because they took the words of the Arizal Kipshutei, he moved himself, whatever that means. How could he do it? As the Rebbe learns pshat the other Rebbe, he's Kol Yochel, he can move himself aside and make an empty space. So they learned it Kipshutei Kamashmoi. Here you see the Rebbe saying this Pshutei Kamashmoi works for Nigla, but doesn't always work for Nista de Torah. In Nista de Torah, sometimes you have to put things into context. Just by having an example, if somebody comes in, if you tell a child, you know, my Rosh Yeshiva is much bigger than your principal. And then they both come into the room, and the Rosh Yeshiva happens to be a midget, and the principal is 7 foot. What's the child going to say? It's the gesagt Haligend. He's actually Shtemes. My principal is much bigger than him. Versteht sich? That's not what you meant when you said big and small. You don't take things literally. A child takes things literally. When it comes to Nista, you can't take it literally. So this is what the Gedolei Yisrael that understood that Tzimtzum Lo Kipshutei said, don't take it literally. It didn't mean moving it. It's not a piece of furniture that has to move aside. Tzimtzum means that the inyan of Tzimtzum, which we know Chassidus means Helam V'Gilu. So that here also, when it says Maila Mata, it can't be Kipshutei Maila in space. There's no space Gashmi when we're talking about Elokus. So what does Maila Mata mean? Kipshutei, it's going on Aliyah Lamaila, that means the Helam of Oir, and Hamshacha Lamata is the Gilui of Oir. That's Pshutai of Nista de Torah, which will therefore strengthens the question, if that's the case, why did he change course by Perik to Zion, our Perik from this year? He suddenly changed course. No, my Lamat is two Madregas. It's not Pshutai, number one, and it causes actually problems, because when you say it's two Madregas in Oir and Sof, that's a shtickle problem now, right? Because how have you translated Maila Mata now? Teirim of Gvul. Maila is one level, and Mata is another level. These are Teirim of Gvul. They don't apply in the Elokus. When we ask the question, how can you say Maila Mata and Oir Sof? What was the question? We're talking Elokus. You can't have Maila and Mata, a ceiling and a floor in Oir and Sof. So what does it mean there's Maila Mata? There's an Inyan in Oir and Sof, which is Maila, which is Ilui, Helam, Nis'ala Lamaila, Nichlal in Moir. And there's an Inyan of Mata that he's Nimshach Lamata. And he's Meir, and he's Machayim, Mahav, all the Nivroim. Bata Machayas Kulam. That makes sense. That's what you mean by Maila Mata. But now that you've come to Perik Tezayin, you're changing course, and you're saying that Maila Mata is Taka Hagbolas. There's a Madrega called Maila, and there's a Madrega called Mata, and these are two levels in Oir and Sof. And Yesh Hefresh Gadol B'Neim, which is again his Chalkus. You're splitting things up. That's all in Yonim of Gvul. What's the thrust of the whole Maamar Azal, Oir and Sof L'Maila, and the Gates of Mata? What's the whole Mechuven? What do you think they're trying to say in this Lashon of the Zayah, or almost Lashon of the Zayah? Oir and Sof is L'Maila, in case of what are you trying to say with that? You're trying to say the floor of Oir and Sof. You know how great Oir and Sof is? He's L'Maila, Maila, L'Mata Mata. He goes on Ad in Sof. So you're trying to say the Maila of Oir and Sof, the Hafloh of Oir and Sof, the Bleakvul of Oir and Sof. Once you start putting in Madregas, are you going to the Bleakvul of Oir and Sof? Or you're now being Magbalit, that Maila Mata means this is one level and this is another level. You're going completely against the whole Mechuven of the Maamar Azal. It's not Kipshute. So basically, although the Rebbe doesn't say in the Lashon of the Tzarech L'Havin, there's, should we say, three questions arrive now in the Maamar. What are the three questions? Number one, you've changed course to a new Pirush in Maila Mata. Is Minoha Namila, where do you know this from? Where do you get this from? Why? You suddenly changed in the middle, Shaloi Kipshute. Where are you getting this from? That would be the first question. The second question would be, which we're going to see in a second, the Rebbe asks, how could there be Madregas in Oir and Sof? If he's Oir Ein Sof. And what's the Taich Oir Ein Sof? That he's Taka Ein Sof. Ba'atzma is Ein Sof. He's really Ein Sof. He's not something that is being held up by Ein Sof. For example, the planet Earth and the sun is also Ein Sof for the time being. As long as the Eibishter continues to create it, make it go around like that for however long the Eibishter decides, it keeps on going. So it's an Indian of Ein Sof. Theoretically, the sun and the moon and everything can keep on going. But it's not Be'etzem Ein Sof. He's a Nivra Mugbul, and the Koyach Ein Sof is holding him that he should continue to go the whole time. The Tmidiyah Shaban Hogas HaTeva is that the Eibishter's Koyach Ein Sof is pushing that Teva should continue and continue and continue. But the Teva itself is Mugbal. Even the sun, keep on going, it has powerful light, which seems to be Ein Sof, but it's only from there to there. It's very big, but it's still from here to there. Masheik in Oir Ein Sof, when you say Oir is Ein Sof, what do we mean it's Ein Sof? That he himself is Ein Sof. As it's explained in, and we're soon going to see it, I mean, he does bring it down here, but it's explained where he talks about what Oir Ein Sof means, that when the Oir is Dovuk in the Moir, the Oir itself becomes Ein Sof. It is an Oir Ein Sofi. The Taich of Oir Ein Sof is not Oir Shel Ein Sof. The Taich of Oir Ein Sof is the Oir is an Ein Sofi Oir. Right? Eved Ivri means an Eved of an Ivri, or the Eved himself is an Ivri? Or the Bali Nigla? What? The Eved himself is an Ivri. Oir Ein Sof doesn't mean Oir Shel Ein Sof, it means Oir Ein Sofi. He himself is Ein Sof. So if he's Taka Oir Men Amor and he's Ein Sof, so how comes there hasn't it Madregas? How are you putting it in Madregas? That's another problem. And the third question would be, the first question is, it's not Kipshute. The second question is, how comes there could be even Madregas and Oir and Sof? And the third question is why? Why did you change Pshat?
How's that different from the first question?
First question is, why, not why, it's more, how could it, what is this pshat? Where are you getting this from? That there's a new pirish in Oyer Sof, in Maila Mata. Oyer Sof Maila Mata. Where are you getting this from? That's not what we learned till now. Till now we had Kipshutai, Oyer Sof is Oyla and Yored. Fine. We were doing fine until Perek Design. All of a sudden Perek Design has new pirish. Where'd you get this from?
What's the need for this new pirish?
No, where are you getting it from? That's not Pshutai of the Maamar Hazal. Right? So the first thing is where you're getting it from. The second one is, how could there be Madregas if it's Oyer Ein Sof? We're used to it because we learn in Chassidus the whole time. There's different Madregas and Oyer Ein Sof. But Me'ikya Hadin, where are you getting this from? How is it possible? If it's Ein Sof, it's Ein Sof. It's Me'en HaMoer. The question is not just if it's Me'en HaMoer, what does it mean Me'en HaMoer? Who's the Moer? Atzmus Ein Sof. And in Atzmus Ein Sof are the Madregas? Chas v'shon, there's no Madregas. Oyer, which is Me'en HaMoer, should also be an oil which has no madregas. So how do you get madregas of Maila Mata in Oyer and Sof? And the third question will be, what tiyelis do you have from this pirish? Why did you have to change? The third one is easy to understand. Why do you think the Fidik Rebbe changed pirish to madregas in Oyer and Sof?
It has to be an Eitzah.
He has to explain what the Eitzah is, so we have to find a madrega called Eitzah. That's a simple pshat. He wants to explain the Eitzah, right? So he has to find, where is this Eitzah? Madrega in Oyer Sof. The whole Oyer Sof is an Eitzah. No. There's a certain Madrega in Oyer Sof which is called Eitzah. Oh, so there's Madregas. So he has to prove first of all that there are Madregas, and then he can go and say, this Madrega over here, this one is the Eitzah. Okay, so that's the first part of the Maamar, which is the Yesod of the whole Maamar. We're going to try and understand where does he get this from, but first he's going to answer the second question, which we said, which is what? How could there be Madregas in oil, which is Ein Sof? So let's go further, see base. Well, so far so good, yeah? You understand? Mamshach beperek l'shon hazu. In the base in Yonim Eile der in Sof Lamayla in the case of Lamata Adamata Din Tachlis, Heim Beis Madregas Ber in Sof Yesh Hefresh Gadol Beinehem. Shebezeh Moisef Inyan Chodesh. Dezeh Shoyin in Sof Lamayla in the case of Lamata Din Tachlis, Hu Loira Kamosh Nispai Le'el Shoyin in Sof Nimshach Lamayla Mayla V'Yed Lamata Mata, Ela Shebo'el in Sof Atzmoi Kamosh Hu V'Yeriz Yesh Bei Ha'inyan Shel Lamayla Mayla Adin Kates Ulamata Mata Adin Tachlis. ואפילו כמו שהם באור אין סוף הם גם כן בייס דרגס ועוד יועסה שיש הפרש גדול ביניהם. Okay. So what we understand, so these are the questions we have to understand. שמזה מובן שאין זה עניין היכולס. From this we understand the fact that he said that there's two levels. We understand we're not talking about the madrega of Yicholis. Who mentioned Yicholis over here? Why would you think it's talking about Yicholis? Very unusual thing all of a sudden. We're not talking about Yicholis. As if somebody had come along and said, you know what, it's talking about Yicholis. Why would you think it's talking about Yicholis? So he says, it can't be talking about Yicholis. Why not? Let's just go further a little bit. Shahari gam bi Yicholis yesh ma shemizgala ve'ein mizgala yored ve'ein yored. Ki k'moy shehem b'yicholes hare ein shaykh leim beis dargas. Shesh beis dargas. Shari zeu inyan ha-yicholes shekolol beis hatnuas. Okay, so it can't be yicholes because in yicholes there's no two madregas. Va'afilu in midchok. So it sounds like whoever wanted to answer this, that is talking about yicholes, is really pushing for it. So afilu im nidchok loimed v'kim shehem beis tnuas im yeshem in yinechod. Ef sheyoyma al zeh beis madregas. Mikol mokim harei ef sheloyma sheyesh hefresh gadol b'neihem. Shaloi ein hefresh b'neihem klal. Dezehu mitis inyan ha-yicholes sheyochel kach yochel ba'efen hafchi. Shemikol zeh muvin shekavona kan hi lemata me'inyan ha-yicholes. Well, why would we want to say that it's yicholes?
Because it fits all the criteria and doesn't raise questions.
I can't hear what you're saying, sorry.
It fits what we need and it doesn't raise questions.
How does it fit what we need?
Because it has both the Maila and the Mata in before the Tzimtzum.
Before the Tzimtzum. How does that help? We know we're talking about Lifnei Tzimtzum, and we just said there's two levels Lifnei Tzimtzum. There's Maila and Mata. There's two Madregas and Meir and Sof. So it says, we're not talking about Yecholos. That means we would have wanted to talk about Yecholos. What would we have wanted to say about Yecholos?
The Maila and the Mata.
That what? That these two Madregas that we just said is two levels of Meir and Sof is what are we talking about? We're talking about in Yecholos. Oh. So if we talk about Yecholos, if we say that the Maila and the Mata, which you said is two Madregas, we're now going to send them up to Yecholos. We're not talking about in Eir and Sof. So we're going to have to reread that line at the beginning of Perek Design. V'hine beis inyonim elu, the Eir and Sof, l'mayla, the Ketz Matavat and Tachlis, heim beis Madregas ba'Eir and Sof. Let's add on. Chisurim mechzer v'hachikatani. Beis Madregas ba'Eir and Sof, hakol ba'atzmusei, which is Yecholos. Oh, if we have that pirush, if the Fidik Rebbe really means in Yecholos, everything's fine. There's no madregas as in his chalkus madregas. There's no levels Teirim of Gvul, which we said is a problem. Teirim of Gvul, I can say Maila Mata and stuff. Talking about in Yecholos. In Yecholos, everything's fine. Maila Mata in Yecholos means the Yecholos for Maila, and the Yecholos for Mata, the Yecholos Lahoya, and the Yecholos Shaloi Lahoya. Everything's fine. It's one Inyan called the Yecholos. So it's an attempt, sort of, to answer the question. He says, no, we can't do that. We can't send him up to Yecholos. We can't send Maila Mat up to Yecholos. Why now? Why not? He says, because in Yecholos, there are no two Madregas. There's no Madregas in Yecholos. Yecholos is one Inyan. It's Yecholos this, Yecholos that. So there's no two levels. But now comes the next bit. That means whoever wanted to answer this Havamina, wants to push for it. No, let's still talk about Yecholos. How are we going to do that now? In other words, we're going to translate that Madregas doesn't mean Madregas. Madregas means Nuas, which is a doichik, because that's not the meaning of the word. Madregas means Madregas. But let's be doichik a little bit. Just the man hasholim will be doichik a little bit, and we'll say that Madregas means Tnuas. So why would you say there's two Tnuas in Eir and Sof? Why would you call them Madregas?
What's the meaning of Tnuas?
Huh?
What's the meaning? What's the
Tnuah means it has the Tnuah. Tnuah means a movement. It moves in this direction, it moves in that direction. Yecholos can go this way, it can go that way.
In Tnuas, it's not Agbola?
It's not Agbola. It's a Yecholos. Yecholos means he could.
In Tnuas.
It's not Agbola, no, he's not doing it yet, but he has the potential to move this way, to move to Lahoya, or to move to Shloi Lahoya. Why is it Deichik? Because he says the words Madregas. It doesn't say Tnuas. But we're going to be Deichik and say that here the Kavana is Tnuas. How can you do that? Why would he want to say the word Madregas if it really means Tnuas? Why would he do that? Why would the Fidik Rebbe say the word Madregas and it really means Tnuas? I mean, we know it's a Deichik, but even the Deichik has to make a Deichik sense. So how much sense does this make that the Tnuas, the Madregas mean? Why would you want to call them Madregas then? So, we're not up to the Eitzer yet, we're talking about Yecholos now. Yecholos is not the Eitzer. Yecholos is a Madrega in Eir and Sof. What's that? Oh. So what you want to say is like this. You want to say, although in Yecholos it's one Yecholos, this way or that way, but we want to eventually separate between the two of them. And since we want to separate between the two of them, and that's the whole mechuvan of this Maamar Azal, what's the Maamar Azal saying? That Eir and Sof has two milas. It's l'mayla, mayla, l'mata, mata. So you want to separate the milas. So for the separation's sake, we're going to call them Madregas. Madregas sounds, even though there's no Chas V'Shalom, Yecholos, everything's Achdus, but in Inyan we're separating them to two Madregas. So maybe we could be Deichik and say that the Madregas here He really means tnuas, but he's calling them madregas because he wants to bring out the differences. He says, but that wouldn't work either. Even that doesn't work. Why doesn't it work?
Because there is no difference.
Because
There's no difference.
there is no difference, but that's not the reason. That's not the raya. The raya is from Ef Shaloma sheyesh hefresh gadol b'neihem. This is vafilim nitchek loimed the kivim sheim beis in tnuas. Al derech ima yosheim inyan echad. Ef Shaloma al zeh beis madreis mikol mokim hari ef Shaloma sheyesh hefresh gadol b'neihem. You want to separate into two inyanim, two tnuas is fine, but to say hefresh gadol b'neihem shaloi ein hefresh b'neihem klal. The zehu amitis inyan hayechoresh sheyachol kach yachol ba'ofen hafchi. Shemikol zeh muven shakavona kani lamata minyan hayechoresh. If you would have just said stay madregas and you want to be doichek, there's a half a chance to get that in and say that two madregas means two tnuas. But once you say hefresh gadol b'neihem, it's clear that you mean the hagdara of two madregas kipshutai, two levels in Ein Sof. So if we have two levels in Ein Sof, it can't be that we're talking about Yechoros, we're obviously talking about the Oer HaGolomb. Has he been moisef anything in understanding what Yechoros is? We'll soon see. Because this whole pilpul about Yechoros is very interesting. He's saying maybe we're talking about Oer HaKol Bas which is Yechoros, and then maybe you can call them two madregas, even though it's really one. He says, but we can't do that because of Hefresh Gadol b'neihem. Have we gained anything from sending it up to Yechoros in this Havamina, this whole pilpul? We'll soon see that there is a shtickle gain in the next part of the Maamar. It's a very mesudik inyan. Omnon tzarach lahavin. Eich ef shalom. You see, even here it's in one sieve. Eich ef shalom the ba'er sof atzma yesh beis madregas. So now that we've decided, yes, beis madregas is kipshuta, there's two levels in Ein Sof. The ma'ilad and ketz lamata in tachas. Aber haloi me'acha shenikra b'shem Ein Sof. Ukubeshemash ba'ad mazokim kam b'keim she'ein hefresh bazeh. Oir ein she'ein apirish bazeh. Oir shel Ein Sof. Ela shehoir atzma hu Ein Sof. Va'akavana bazeh. Ein Sof ho amiti. שאין לו ראש ואין לו תחילה ואין לו סוף. ואם כן, איך שייך לב בו למעלה למטה מטה, הרי אין זה עניין האין סוף מאח שמסחלק בדרגס. So since there's madregas, the shayla is how can you have madregas? Madregas and ein sof don't seem to go together. Right? I don't think we're going to have too much time. Let's repeat the nakudas. Should be clear what we spoke till now. If we have another time maybe. The question here, the Maamar basically is that all of a sudden when it comes to Perik Tezayin, the Fidik Rebbe changes course. Till now, Ein Sof L'mayla L'mata means that Ein Sof is Oila L'mayla and is Yerid L'mata. Gilui and Helam. That is Pshutai Shal Nista the Torah. That makes sense. That makes sense in Nista the Torah. Because Mayla Mata is Teirim of Gvul, and you can't have Teirim of Gvul in Elakus. So therefore, Mayla Mata doesn't mean space, doesn't mean levels, it doesn't mean a floor and a ceiling, it means an aliyah L'mayla, which is his alma sa'or, and hamshacha L'mata, which is his gala sa'or. That was till now. All of a sudden now, we go to the complete other side of understanding Mayla Mata. The Mayla Mata is space, is an inyan of Gvul. Where do you see that? He says there are two levels in Ein Sof. One's called Mayla, one's called Mata. Two madregas. Madregas is Teirim of Gvul. So why did he leave the Pshuta Shel Maamar Azal, which Mayla Mata is Ali Nirida, and change to two madregas? Why did he do that? Number one, why did he do it? Number two, where did he get it from? You can say the question whichever order you want. Why did he do it? Where did he get it from? And how is it possible? How can you have levels in Ein Sof? Isn't it Ein Sof? That's the question he's asking now. Isn't it Ein Sof? If it's Ein Sof, it shouldn't have any madregas. Oir is Ein Sof. Doesn't mean it's Oir Shel Ein Sof. That means it's coming from Ein Sof, but he himself is not Ein Sof. Oir Ein Sof means he's Oir Ein Sofi. He's an Eved Ivri. He himself is an Ivri. Oyer Ein Sofi means that the Oyer itself became a Bechin of Ein Sof. If it itself is a Bechin of Ein Sof, so it shouldn't have any levels. It's Me'en HaMoyer. The Moyer doesn't have any levels. How do you get the levels in the Oyer? And these three questions is the base of the whole Maamar, to explain how it fits with Pshutei Shel, what's the hechrech to learn this way, that is going on two levels, and not just what we learned till now, Aliyah and Yerida. We're going to have to say there's a mocker for this Inyan to say there's Ma'ila Mata in Oyer and Sof, two levels. There's also, he's going to explain in a second, how it's possible to have Madregas in Oyer and Sof. Isn't it Ein Sof? How's it level? So he's going to explain that very soon. And in the end, it's going to come out understanding what basically the Yesod, we know that the reason why he went into this was because we have to get to a level in Oyer and Sof which is called Oitzer. And in order to get to a level of Oitzer, you have to tell me that there's different levels in Oyer and Sof. Otherwise, how am I going to know what the Oitzer is? The Oitzer is the whole Oyer and Sof, or is there a particular level in Oyer and Sof? He wants to get to a particular level in Oyer and Sof which is called Oitzer. So we have to have that Dhamma that there are levels in Oyer and Sof. And this one, the highest one, is going to be called the Oitzer. That's for now.